So in a previous video, we said that lipids were even numbered. And I told you that we will kind of take a look at why that begins to happen. Well, it's all based on how these lipids are made. Really, honestly, that is where it's coming from. So it's in the mechanism route. It's in the reaction scheme of why we traditionally see fatty acids, at least, not really lipids. I guess that's a mistake. I should say fatty acids. Why fatty acids are even in number. And that's because they are made from a group that you are familiar with, and this group is the acetate group. So all fatty acids are traditionally made from acetate. And because they're made from acetate, well, acetate is CH3COO minus, right? There's two carbons that are there. So two carbons get pieced together one by one by one by one. So hence 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Who do we appreciate, right? I feel like a cheerleader sometimes. So because of the acetate functional group, these fatty acids tend to bring to the table even number of carbons. And that is what we begin to look for, and that is why these fatty acids, again, have an even number hydrocarbon chain because of the way that they're made. If you take a look, or if you want to know the schematic and the mechanism of how this is really made, then you need to take a look at the biosynthesis route for the creation of these fatty acids. And that's something that we're not going to get into. We're not going to go into detail with how our body makes lipids or how lipids are made, but if you do want to know that, then you can find that in your text, and your textbook will reference you to the corresponding chapter that that is coming from. And they will reference you to the section that includes the carbonyl functional group family, and probably the section on the type 3 carbonyls, which include reactions at the alpha carbon. So if you do want to know a little bit more detail or the reaction schemes, I won't ask for it though, but if you want to know just for general knowledge, and I doubt that many of you will look it up in the first place, but if you do, it's going to be in that section that you can refer to. Now, another term that we can use when we talk about fatty acids is probably also something that you've came across before in the past, and this is the word omega. So, omega fatty acids. Very, very important, because omega fatty acids typically have some health benefit to us. And, very often you'll see these pills or vitamins labeled with omega fatty acid, now includes omega whatever, and they give you a number after it. So we want to talk about what this word omega really means. And omega is just referring to the position of the first double bond. So it gives us an idea of what type of fatty acid that we have and that we're dealing with and that we're working with. So let's go back to this chart, and let's take a look at linoleic acid. So here's the structure for linoleic acid. It is a omega acid, which means there's a double bond involved. And I want to know where that first double bond is at. Now, what you got to keep in mind here, and this is where people do get confused sometimes, is that biologists really have done this, not chemists. So we've already said that with this structure, linoleic acid, this is my carbon number 1, and this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and on carbon number 9 is the first double bond according to the IUPAC name. So that's why we see 9Z here. This is carbon 10, this is carbon 11, and this is carbon 12. So carbon 12, there's the Z formation. It's another cis formation. The problem is that biologists have gotten into the picture, nutritionists have gotten to the picture, and they don't really like or follow the same type of rules that we do when it concerns nomenclature. So we regard this as carbon number 1. However, with the omega acid names, all of these people look at the end carbon right here. And this is what they count as carbon number 1. And they will count carbon 1, carbon 2, carbon 3, carbon 4, carbon 5, and carbon 6. So linoleic acid, according to nutritionists, will be an omega 6 fatty acid. And that 6 is the position where the first double bond happens from the end, from the tail, not from the COOH end, like we would number that as number 1 for IUPAC name. They don't follow that. They don't care about IUPAC. They showed IUPAC up. They said, we don't care what you say. We're going to do what we want to do. And we're going to number on the opposite end, just to make you upset and to make you angry. So if I look at oleic acid, this is carbon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So oleic acid would be an omega 9 fatty acid. If I look at linoleic acid, this is 1, 2, and 3. So that would be an omega 3 fatty acid. If I look at arachidonic acid, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that is an omega 6 fatty acid as well. So that is this term that we use called omega. It's used to determine or to describe the position of the very first double bond of an unsaturated fatty acid. Now, with that said, keep in mind these can't be omegas up here at the top. Right? There's no double bond for me to play off of. So I can't have anything omega if it concerns a saturated fatty acid, just because there's no double bond involved. And if there's no double bond, I can't give it a number, and therefore it's not an omega. So linoleic is an omega 6. So what's the important thing about omega fatty acids that people go crazy over? I mean, why is it such a hot word? Why is it such a hot topic? For me to understand what an omega fatty acid is and to make sure that I include it in my diet. Okay, well, there's 2 omega acids that are very important, at least nutritionists and doctors think they're very important, and that is omega 3 and omega 6. So that means from the end of that carbon chain, well, the molecules that have the double bond 3 carbons in, and the molecules that have the double bond 6 carbons in for the first one, the omega 3s and the omega 6s are the most important, and they call them the essential fats. And these essential fats are very good fats according to what our body needs in order for it to operate. They do everything from healthy cells to brain function. And it's something that we want to incorporate in our diet because our body cannot make them. So that basically means that our body cannot insert these double bonds into these structures to make omega 3s and omega 6s. We have to get them from food sources. Well, where do these food sources come from? Okay, well, the food sources are going to come from what you cook with for the most part. So if I take a look at butter and oil, well, butter is a saturated fat. And saturated fats come from animal sources for the most part, animal fat. So this animal product is going to be saturated. That is not an omega fatty acid, and that is something that my body can do without. I don't really need those saturated fats. I need my omegas. Where do the omegas come from? Well, the omegas will come from vegetable sources. So very often you will see vegetable oils, and you will see canola oils, and you will see olive oils that are out there. Think about the difference here. Butter is a solid. Butter is a saturated fat. We've already talked about that. We've discussed why that begins to happen. The intermolecular forces of the butter molecules are basically extra glue because there's no kinks in the molecules. However, oils from vegetable sources have these double bonds in them. And this is where my omega-3s and 6s come into play. And these kinks in the molecule lowers the melting point. And that's why my vegetable oils and my canola oils and my olive oils are all liquids in base, because it's these curvy little molecules that don't have as much glue to get them to stick together. You'll also find omega-3s and omega-6s in fish. That is why they often tell you, hey, listen, if you're going to cut out meat in your diet, that's okay, but maybe at least include some fish into the mix, because these are your omega fatty acids. Or if you are going to eat and you want to eat healthy, well, put a focus on fish and eat that because of the omega fatty acids that can be found in it. There are very good protein sources for that reason. Well, okay. That doesn't mean that you can take a piece of fish and bread it and deep fry it and get that nice crust on the outside of it and have deep fried fish and make yourself feel better about what you eat. That is not what we're talking about. This fish should be baked, and it should be in the oven with as little oil as you can, or as little butter, or as little flavoring as you can get away with. So that's what I typically call butter. It is a flavor, right? I want to cook with butter. I'm going to give it flavor. And this is making me feel better about cooking with butter all the time. I use it as an herb, as a seasoning, and I can get away with it because of that. All right, what you will see is that omega-6s mostly come in the form of linoleic acid. That is one of the most common fatty acids that you will see out there. That's the common fatty acid that you are putting into your mouth and that you're eating. And this is coming from corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, as well as nuts and seeds. So it says that most 5% to 10% of your food calories should come, or probably do come, in the form of omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-3s are coming from your fish, and this is salmon and mackerel and tuna. Well, I'm not a really big seafood person. I can do maybe tuna out of a can. Isn't that weird? No tuna steak? What? And then I can do a little bit of salmon as long as it doesn't taste fishy. But I can also get them from walnuts and flaxseed. And believe it or not, I use that very often in my cooking. So walnut and flaxseed, again, think of them as seasoning, and you will start to cook with them even more than what you do now, even if you do cook with them now. So take a look at some of those recipes with flaxseed. Take a look at some recipes with walnut. If you're not a big fish eater and you want your omega-3, then that's a way that you can incorporate a naturalistic approach. But for some of you, you might not like walnut, you might not like flaxseed, you might not like salmon, you might not like tuna, you might not like mackerel. So how do I get it? Well, you buy a pill, and you take it just like a vitamin. So omega-3 can come into the form of a pill. Take it with a glass of water, and there you go. There's your omega-3. Okay, so this whole story with omega-6s and omega-3s, it's very important that you understand that these oils are called polyunsaturated fats. So if I take a look at this chart, this is an unsaturated fat, this is an unsaturated fat, this is a polyunsaturated fat. It has more than one double bond. This is a polyunsaturated fat. This is a polyunsaturated fat. These are molecules with more than one double bond, and that's what we call polyunsaturated on those nutrition labels. These polyunsaturated fats, there is a growing evidence, as the article says, that it helps lower the risk of heart disease. However, new studies are now showing that a fat's a fat. It doesn't really matter if it's unsaturated or if it's saturated. A fat is a fat no matter how you look at it. And yeah, out of the two, unsaturated is going to be a little bit better than saturated. But if you're really worried about your health, you don't need to be using any of this at all. Olive oil is as bad as butter. So if you're cooking with olive oil and you cook with butter, again, take a look at what you're doing. You're still incorporating fat into the diet. And if you really want to eliminate the fats, then you need to be eliminating all fats across the board. No olive oils, no butters, no vegetable oils. Bake everything when you can. So in the next video, we'll continue on with this discussion of omega fatty acids.